So over the course of about a month, I've been working on this inventory system for my game, and this project is one that I'm most proud of. So I decided I wanted to make a video about it and show it off, maybe give you some inspiration, show you guys how I ran through this, how I set it all up. I'm not going to be getting into the code, but I will be getting into the mechanics of how it all works. All right, so now that we're in Unity, I'm going to be showing you how the inventory system works, and then we'll get into the back-end mechanics of it all. I've set up a key that'll populate the inventory with random items from a list that I created. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Hovering over an inventory slot, the inventory slot turns green. It's pretty simple. It just shows you which slot that you're selecting. When you click on an item, you pick that item up, and then I can move it anywhere and place it anywhere. If I right click on an item, I'll pick up half of the stack, and I can move half the stack around and place that anywhere. However, if I'm holding an item and then I decide to right click on an inventory slot, I can place a single item from that stack. This is all heavily based off of Minecraft's inventory system. As you can see here, when I picked up an item, the left side here has been grayed out, and that's because I'm holding a consumable item, and the left side here is an equipable weapon slot. So I can place the consumables in the consumable slots, but I can't place the weapons in the consumable slots. The weapons go in the weapon slots. That's about all there is to that. Nothing crazy. I've also created an auto sorting and condensing system. So if I hit the tab key here, it'll auto condense all of the items that are not in a max stack into the least amount of stacks possible, and then we'll sort the entire inventory by item type and then item ID. This system was relatively difficult to create, but I got it all working. I've tested it 1,000 times. I am pretty sure that there's no bugs with it, and it just makes an easy way to clean up the inventory system automatically. All right, so I also want to show off that this does work with the controller. So you can see in the bottom left corner there that I just connected my DualShock controller, and now I can move the mouse around with the joystick, or I can use the D-pad, which will hide the mouse, and it all works the same as if it was a mouse. I can pick up items, move them around, and set items down individually, picking up half the stack, etc. And I can also sort with the controller. Everything that works with the keyboard and mouse works on the controller, and that was a huge key point for me, was that my game is fully playable on a controller. So now that I've showed you the inventory system, we're going to get into the back-end mechanics of how all of this is actually working. Okay, so how this works is I have an inventory manager script, and this is essentially the umbrella for the entire inventory system. This is what every key point of the inventory system relays back to and tells the manager what they want to do, and the manager itself is what executes the code to get it done. So when you click on an inventory slot, it relays back to the manager, and the manager says, okay, pick up the item, or place the item, or split the stack in half, etc. The manager is by far the most important piece, and it is essentially the engine running this whole system. The code itself starts from the inventory slot. So I've got the inventory canvas here, and if we open that up, I've got the inventory bounds. The inventory bounds has a container in it, and the container is a grid layout group that actually contains the individual inventory slots. On each of these inventory slots, I've got an inventory slot script, and that is what tells the inventory manager what it wants to do. The inventory slot has a button on it, and so that is where the interaction is actually coming from, is each of these slots has their own button with their own inventory slot script on it. So when it relays back to the inventory manager already knows which slot that we're interacting with. All right, so the actual item that is within the inventory slots is under a prefab that I call slot content. Now, slot content is an object that holds all of the data of the items that's in the inventory, as well as the item game objects themselves. When I pick up an item, the actual game object of that item gets put under the slot content as a child of that object. I found that it keeps the inventory system very well organized so that when I'm in the hierarchy and I click on an inventory slot, the items that are in that slot are actually children of that slot. The game object itself is turned off, but it's still populated under that slot, which allows me to move the slots around without just moving data. I'm moving the items around as well. Now, the slot content holds all of the information about the items that are in it. The item ID, the item type, the item sprite, and the item stack, which is the max quantity of items that can be in that stack. It also displays the text of how many items are in the stack, and this is what we are actually moving around when we click and pick up the items. The inventory slots stay where they are, but the slot content is what we're picking up and moving around, and I'm going to show you that here right now. Okay, so I've populated some items in the inventory, and as you can see here, slots 1 through 8 are full. They have items in them. We're going to click on slot 1. Now, slot 1, you can see down here on the right, that the inventory slot script is now populated with information. The slot content is the content that is holding this sword, and it shows that the item type is a weapon. So if we open up the inventory slot, you can see that there's a slot content here. The slot content has an item ID of 1, the item type is weapon, the item sprite is the sword icon that you're seeing on screen, and there's only one in the item stack. There's only one that's allowed in the item stack. If you look under items, this is the actual object that is the sword item. So we'll open the slot content, there's an item container, transform, and under that is the object that is the sword. So now I'll show you the inventory manager. You can see down here, there's the held slot content and the held slot origin. If I pick up an item, such as the grenades, the held slot content is now the grenades held slot content. The held slot origin just being the inventory slot from where the grenades came. That is set up as a fallback in case I close the inventory or I decide to switch to a controller, which I'll show you here. If I switch to the controller and decide to use the D-pad, it'll default that item back to the held slot origin. And now I can move it around with the mouse again and default it back to the held slot origin. It just helps keep the inventory system clean. When I place it down, the held slot content is now clear. The held slot origin is now clear. If I pick up an item and swap it with another item, you can't see it because it all has the same name, but the held slot content is actually changing and switching around. The held slot origin stays the same because that inventory slot will always stay empty until I place an item, in which case there no longer needs to be a held slot origin. Alright, so now that I've showed you the inventory system, I don't think that there's much more to explain. At least not on the surface level. I don't want to get too deep into the systems or I'll start confusing you as well as myself. But if there is anything that you would like to know more about or something that I maybe didn't explain very clearly, please let me know down in the comments. This is my first time making a video similar to this, and my first time making a devlog. So I would like to know if there's anything that I've done poorly or if there's anything that I've done great. I would love to hear your feedback, and again, I can explain more of this in the future, but as a first time video, I figured that this would just be best left simple. With that being said, I will catch you all in the next one.